All right, so I'm going to call this money advice for 18 to 25-year-olds. It can be younger, it can be older. It's just general advice for people starting like their working career in college, high school. So first, I want to thank you guys for being interested in this topic. I think it's a very important topic because money can really give you freedom, and it's the fact that you guys are willing to learn this. If you're determined to learn something, nobody can stop you. And I wouldn't be able to drag anyone into this. If they're not willing to learn, no one can help them. But if you're determined to learn, no one can stop you. So do you guys know ChatGPT? It's a new AI that's out there, and that's actually pretty good. If you don't know about it, go check it out. But I asked it, so what topics should a 20-year-old learn about personal finance? And it gave me these. So budgeting and spending, saving and investing, credit scores and credit cards, retirement planning, insurance, taxes, and debt management. And most of these I'm going to actually cover, except for maybe the credit scores and credit cards, but we can do that next time. So first, let's start with budgeting and spending. So a budget, many times when people say a budget, it's like a scary thing, like, oh, it's restrictive. But in reality, it allows you to have some freedom with your money because you know where your money is going. You know how much money you're spending on stuff, and you know how much money you can spend on stuff. So a budget is basically a plan for where your money will go. So, I'm not really good at this. I've always been pretty frugal. So I've managed to save money without having to budget because I always paid myself first. Much like you guys would set money aside to pay the rent because the rent is something important to pay. Otherwise, you end up homeless. To me, saving was important because that money would keep me from becoming homeless when I was older. Right. So I always paid myself first, and I found out later that that's what most wealthy people do. They pay themselves first. And that's the one thing every wealthy person does. And so what I would recommend to you guys, I don't know how you are with money or with budgeting or with any of that stuff, but I would recommend tracking your expenses, seeing where your money's going for maybe like 2-3 months. And then you can kind of make a plan for, okay, so the following month, this is how much money I'm going to have coming in. And this is how much money I'm going to spend on housing, food, car, insurance, gas, whatever, right? And it's important to be realistic because like I always used to set, I was kind of unrealistic with my budget when I tried to budget. I would try to budget like, okay, this month I'm only going to spend $300 on food, but then I end up spending $500 or $600, so that wasn't realistic. So be realistic with your budget, okay? And you're not going to get it right the first time. It's fine to tweak it. For me, it was like, okay, $300 next month, and I ended up spending $500. So I tweaked my budget. Okay, the following month I'm going to do $500 or $600. Right? So Warren Buffett is one of the most successful investors in the world. He's a centibillionaire, I believe. And he says, do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving. And this kind of ties into the pay yourself first, right? Prioritize saving, prioritize setting some money aside. In the same way that you prioritize setting money aside for your rent, you want to prioritize setting money aside for your savings, for your investing, right? And here are 3 budgeting strategies. So some people do this one, where it's you spend 50% on your needs, 30% on your wants, and then 20% on your savings. And when I say savings, that can be give me a second. All right. Oh man, sorry, gotta find where's the light? Okay. Alrighty. And then 20% for your savings. And when I say savings, that might mean like money in a savings account. That might mean paying off your debt. That might mean investing. That's what savings means. Quick mic check. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Another way to do it is the cash envelope. And so if anybody knows, show of hands, who's heard of Dave Ramsey? Nobody. Ah, shame. Okay, that's fine. I'll be the one to introduce you guys. Don't don't feel ashamed. It's fine. I had to learn about him too. But he's great at getting people out of debt, and he advocates the cash envelope system. And that's where you basically take all your money, all the income that you have in cash, and you put a certain amount of cash into an envelope. So say, this is my food envelope. This is once I spend this money, there's no more left. So and that helps kind of like see how much money is left in the budget for that. And another one is a zero-based budget. Now, this isn't so important. Like my biggest recommendation is just to prioritize saving. Basically, pay yourself first. Set some money aside first, just like the rent. Set some money aside for your saving, for your debt, or for your investing. Okay. All right. So you guys have heard that time is money, right? And one way to think about money is not when you buy something, when you buy a pair of shoes for $200, for example, and you make $10 an hour, like you bring home $10 an hour, you bring home $20 an hour, right? After taxes. How many hours of work? So if the pair of shoes costs $200, how many hours of work, if you make 20 an hour after taxes, how many hours of work would you have to work to be able to pay for that thing? This is interactive, guys. Help me out here. So $200 shoes, you bring home $20 an hour. How many hours do you have to work to pay for those shoes?
10.
10 hours, right? $20 times 10 hours, $200. So when you start thinking of objects that you buy in terms of hours that you had to work for it, it starts becoming a little more valuable to you, right? So start thinking of things not in terms of the dollar value, but in terms of hours of your life that you had to exchange for this money, right? So really time, as they say here, time is your most valuable asset. Don't waste it, right? All right, so next one. And this is another one. I was talking earlier about going through your last 3 months of expenses and see where you spent your money. So if time equals money, were any of your purchases a waste of your time? All right, so now I want to, did someone say something? Okay, so now I want to go through needs versus wants. Now, I don't know if this will apply to you guys. I will spend a lot of time on this because it's very important for young people to know the difference between needs versus wants. And I'm going to be railing hard against people spending money on flashy stuff, Gucci belts, Lamborghinis, just anything flashy, right? And how it's not that important. And I'll explain why. So you've probably heard that lottery winners get millions of dollars and then they're broke, like just a few years later. And the reason for that is that they don't appreciate the value of money. They don't understand the value of that money. So like there's people who won like $6 million in the lottery. They think it's an unlimited amount of money. They go and buy $1 million house. They go and buy a $500,000 car. They buy their family member stuff. And all of a sudden, a year later, they're left with $500,000 and like, where did all that money go? So when they first got that $6 million, which by the way is enough to keep someone, if you invest it properly, it's enough to keep you without having to work. It's enough to last you the rest of your life. But to them, it lasted just a little over a year, right? And that's because they didn't spend it right. And so it's important to understand the difference between needs and wants. And so there's 4 different categories, I like to say. There's a need, a want, a like, and a love that you can spend money on. So you have to spend money on needs. That's obviously, right? Your food, your shelter, your clothing, right? And you should spend money on love. Something you absolutely love, it's okay to spend money on. You want to avoid spending money on want and like. Something you want or something you just like, try to avoid those and spend money on your needs and the things you absolutely love. So make sure you're trading these hard-earned dollars, these hard-earned hours of your life that you had to exchange for money on stuff that you absolutely love or you absolutely need, not something that you just want or you just like, right? And never, 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 never go into debt to buy a want. There are so many people who get in trouble because they have these flashy cars, these expensive jewelry, watches, houses, these big houses, but they're broke. they bought this stuff with debt, and they feel the need to show off maybe, or they feel the need to treat themselves because maybe they grew up poor, and this is kind of a form of revenge spending, right? So do not, don't go flexing with stuff that you bought, with debt. Here's another example, and there's going to be like 20 slides of this, so bear with me, guys. This guy says, my friend who wears Gucci doesn't know what an ETF is. And I'm going to explain what that is a little bit, but it's like a stock fund. It's an investment fund. And then my friend who wears Old Navy has almost $1 million invested. Maybe there's a lesson in there. That lesson is that the people who understand money know that you don't need to show off for other people. The Gucci clothing is there to show off for other people, to make yourself look good. So people think you're rich. But the one who wears Old Navy with $1 million invested, he has no need to show off. He knows he's rich, right? And another one is the biggest financial advantage you can give yourself in your 20s is resisting the urge to impress anyone. Now, I've lived that way my whole life. Initially, it was out of necessity. And then later, when I started being really frugal, I've always been frugal, right? I've always saved money. I've always paid myself first. I've always set money aside. Before I spent money on anything, I set money aside for first to pay off my debt, then to save, and then to invest, right? And I always dressed modestly. I always drove a modest car. I always lived modestly. I rented a room like well into my 20s. When I was in the Air Force for 8 years, and when I got out, I moved in with my sister. So I was 30 years old, living like renting a room for my sister. So don't be afraid to live like a college student for longer than your peers would, because all that money you save by not spending on the big house, the fancy car, the jewelry, the watches, or whatever it is that you think would bring you value, can go into buying your freedom, can go into getting invested and building a strong financial foundation for yourself, right? So live in a small place, drive a modest car, keep a simple wardrobe, patiently accumulate assets that will give you freedom for the next 4 to 5 decades. I'm hoping that one of you will be able to reach retirement by 30. It's possible, and I'll show you how. So here's another example. So do you guys know who this is?
It's that Jay-Z.
That's Jay-Z. Look at the difference. And you see this with a lot of rappers, actually. You see this with Dr. Dre. You see this with, not Eminem so much, but many rappers, like when they were broke. Yeah, you see this with Young Thug. You see this with a bunch of rappers. When they're broke, when they don't have a lot of money, they really feel that they need to show that they have money. And so Jay-Z is now worth over $1 billion, and look how he dresses. It's expensive clothing, but it's not flashy. It's comfortable, right? Now, what's the difference between a Lamborghini and a Corolla? What do you guys think? Throw some stuff out for me here.
The speed. Right.
The brands, right? So let's start what's in common. What do they have in common? The Lamborghini and the Corolla. What's one thing they have in common?
And
transportation. They're both cars, right? They'll both get you from A to B. They both drive. There's nothing much different there, right? The only thing they're different on is so you have a car, it gets you from A to B, right? But the difference is the Lamborghini has, let's say it's a fancier car. You have the status, right? You have the status, you have the fancy, you have the flash, right? But it's 10 times more expensive, or in the case of the Lamborghini Countach, I don't know how that's pronounced, it's 100 times more expensive than your regular Corolla sedan, right? What are you getting for that 9? So these ones are about 10 to 15 times more expensive than a Corolla. This one's 100 times more expensive, but let's just go with the 10, right? Let's say the Huracan, the Lamborghini Huracan. You're spending 10 times more for the flash, right? For the status, for the brand. So you have to think to yourself, is the brand, so you're getting a car, you're getting a form of transportation, is the brand worth 9 times the value of the 200,000? Is that brand worth $200,000 for you? Right? You have to think about that. And so myself, I can afford a Lamborghini because my wife and we were over $1 million here back in 2021, but 2022 was a hard year, but I held through it all. I didn't really freak out. But we're back up. We're at just under 900,000. So I can definitely afford a Lamborghini, but I don't. I drive a 15-year-old Corolla, or actually it's going to be 16 in July. 2007 Corolla. It's got about 230,000 miles on it. Still works. It's cheap. You know, I paid it off 3 years after I got it. So I've been driving it basically for free, just oil changes, gas, and it's pretty good on gas, you know. And look how I dress, right? Pretty modest. I spent $1.50 on these sunglasses. I got t-shirts at Walmart, 3 for $10. My jacket was $19 at Target. My pants were $20 at Target. I got $25 shoes from Zara, you know. But I don't care about showing people that I'm rich. You know, I care about actually being rich. All that money that I'm not spending on flashy stuff, I don't even wear a watch. Check that out, right? All that money that I'm not spending on flashy stuff, I'm putting into my investment. I'm putting into stuff that makes me more money. I'm putting into stuff that actually makes me rich. Right? And here's another example. I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but if you ever see people in like luxury brands, chances are they're probably poor. You see the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the Bill Gates of the world, they all wear like, they look like they shop at Goodwill, honestly. That's because they don't care. They don't feel the need to show off to anyone. And more beating of the dead horse here. So a nice car and a big house are the old status symbols. The ultimate flex is freedom. Time freedom, location freedom, and financial freedom. Basically being able to do whatever you want. That's what money gives you. Another piece of advice, don't go broke trying to look rich, like this guy. He spends all these tens of thousands of dollars on this clothing. Don't go broke trying to look rich. I don't know if you guys heard about LeBron James, but he is famously frugal. He still listens to the free version of Pandora with ads. I mean, maybe it's Spotify now, but he listens to the free stuff. When he goes out to eat, he does the math and sees how much he's going to spend on the food before he buys it. You know, he does all kinds of like little frugal tips, even though he's a billionaire or close to it. And the lesson here is that wealth is what you keep, not what you spend. So yeah, so money is not to buy stuff, it's to buy you your freedom. So if you ask any wealthy person what the best part about being wealthy is, their reply will almost certainly be, I get to do what I want when I want, and not I get to spend lots of money on cars, clothes, and watches. And here's kind of a little joke, you know, you see those people who put a lot of money into their cars, and and you look at that and you could think to yourself, you know, you could have been traveling the world with that money, but instead you chose to go sideways over a speed bump. And another one, rich people stay rich by living like they're broke, like I do. I'm going to be rich. I mean, some people would consider me rich already. I still have a little ways to go until I consider myself completely financially free, but I live like I'm broke, and that's how I'm going to build my financial freedom and gain my wealth, right? And then broke people stay broke by living like they're rich, by showing off the big house, the fancy car, the clothing, you know. So basic advice this is for anyone, but especially for people just starting out in life. Make sure you develop your skills, read a lot, study a lot, gain useful skills, right? And save your money, prioritize saving, make sure the first dollar that comes out of your paycheck is going towards your saving. You know, spend less than you make. That's the only way to wealth, is by spending less than you make and investing the rest, right? Very, very important. Debt is not your friend. I mean, sometimes you have to go into debt, you know, like most 20-year-olds, most 25-year-olds can't afford to buy a car outright. And in that case, it's fine to, you know, take a loan because you need a car to get to your job or whatever. And when you buy a house, you may not be able to buy it outright, so a mortgage is fine. But credit cards, like, try to avoid it. Like, remember the need, like, want, what was it? Need, want, like, love. You know, pay for your needs if you know, whatever you have to, but avoid the wants, the stuff you want, avoid the stuff you like, and only spend money on the stuff you love if you can afford it. Only if you can afford it. Never go into debt to buy stuff you just want or stuff you like. All right. So another thing that many people don't realize. So credit cards can charge you anywhere from 16 to 24%. And if you ever have a credit card and you keep debt on there, like you buy something and don't pay it off in full every month, you're basically every month you're taking out a new loan at that interest rate, 18%, 24%, whatever your credit card is, right? I'm not saying that credit cards are bad. I myself have 15 credit cards, but I pay them off every single month. I never carry a balance. I have ever since I got out of debt, and I was in debt because I was broke and I wasn't making enough. And this was before I joined the military. But then when I joined the military, I was finally able to I had enough money coming in so I could survive. And then I continued living frugally and I paid off my debt quickly, right? So every time you don't pay off your debt, you're taking out a new loan every single month. You're saying, oh yeah, I'll borrow more money at 18%, at 20%, 22%, 24%. So avoid debt. There's many people. So there might be people in your family who do this. They are so-called entrepreneurs, they are businessmen or something like that. And they use debt. They're like, oh, debt is good. You're using other people's money to invest. But it is so risky because if the investment doesn't work out, you are stuck with the debt. You're stuck having to pay back the debt if the investment doesn't go the way you thought. So avoid debt, play it safe, stay frugal. Do not feel the need to show off for anyone. Show off in 10 years when you're a millionaire, or in 15, 20 years when you're a millionaire. And if you guys listen to me, there won't be a single one of you who won't be a millionaire in 20 years, max, right? So next, invest early and often. So yeah, I've been kind of harping on this a little bit, and we're going to talk about. So I'm not going to be able to cover investing much this time, but if you guys are still interested, we can meet up again, maybe next week or next month or something. We'll figure it out. But if you're still interested, I can talk to you about investing. But it's very important. Every month, every paycheck, set some money aside for savings. So you have an emergency fund, some cash, a cash cushion just in a savings account. And then show of hands, let me pull you guys up here. Show of hands, who has some debt? And if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But who has any kind of debt? Are you telling me nobody has debt? No debt. Awesome. Let's keep it that way. Make it happen. No debt. All right. And we can talk about later, various ways to use debt. But for now, just assume debt is toxic. You don't want to go into debt. You don't want to, if possible, you want to save up for your car and buy that car, or you want to save up for a house, buy that house. But we'll talk about that later, right? Just avoid debt. All right. And then you want to use that money that you would spend on paying off your debt, or the savings. You want to have your savings, you want to have your debt paid off, but that doesn't apply to you guys. And you want to start investing. So once you have 3 to 6 months of expenses in the savings account, then you start putting that money into investment, okay? And that money will be put to work for you. It'll be working for you, making you more money. So who here has heard of something called compound interest? Show of hands, just put your hand up like that. Who here, you've heard of compound interest? So compound interest is basically when, let's say I'll keep it simple, make it 10%, right? So let's say you're getting 10% in a savings account, it doesn't exist right now, but it has existed in the past. But let's say you're able to get a consistent 10% in a savings account, and you put $100 in there. At the end of the year, how much do you have? Help me out here, someone. Everybody's mics are off. How much do you have after a year if you put $100 in the savings account at 10%?
10.
$10, right? And let's say instead of pulling that money out, right, you were to leave it in there. So now you would have $110. At the end of the second year, how much would you have? Would you have another $10 in interest, or would it be more?
$11 more.
It'd be $11 more. So at this point, you'd have 110 plus the $11 interest. So you'd have 121, right? And so as time goes on, that's called compounding. As time goes on, it builds on itself. So every year it gets a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. That's called compound interest, and it can be huge. And I'm going to show that to you guys in a minute here. So something I want to hammer into your heads is that there is no get rich quick. Crypto, business, I don't know, penny stocks, all these get rich quick schemes, think of them like the lottery. You know, you might make some money, but chances are you're going to lose it, right? So there is no get rich quick. Can everybody repeat after me? There is no get rich quick. All right, I didn't hear anybody, but I'm going to assume you guys said that. All right. If you have something with a high return, and a high return, what does that mean? Well, the stock market returns about 7 to 10% a year. So if you have anything much higher than that, if you're getting something much higher than 10% a year, chances are there is tremendous risk associated, and risk is like risk of losing everything associated with that investment. So be very careful when somebody tells you, oh yeah, I can double your money in a week, you know, or like into crypto. Did anyone actually invest in crypto the past couple of years? You did? How did it go? It went down, right?
Like $400, but
Okay.
I spent it or invested knowing that I'll lose it. So it was a risk I was willing to take, and I lost it.
I invested in Bitcoin back in 2016. It was $450 a Bitcoin. So I put $1,000 into Bitcoin in 2016. I had 2.2 Bitcoin, and then that's all I did. I was like, that's all I'm ever going to buy in Bitcoin, and I'm going to buy and hold. Everything for me is buy and hold. I don't trade. I don't try to buy and sell, get the little profits here and there. You know, I'm not like that. You know, if I have an investment or a business or a stock that I like, I have to like it for 20 years. That's the only way I'm buying it. You know, it's like a house or a car. The only way I'm buying it is if I can see myself having that thing for 20 years, right? Unfortunately, I got a little greedy. I put that thing on Celsius, and Celsius was paying me interest, and it was great for a while. You know, I was getting extra Bitcoins, just getting more interest and more interest, more interest. And then last year, it turns out that Celsius wasn't being very, let's just say they were being less than truthful about their business practices. So I lost everything. I had, at the highest point, I had $200,000 in crypto on Celsius, and that's all gone. So high risk, or high return, high risk, right? So other types, so that's crypto, right? But the most common types of investments that people invest in are stocks, which are basically ownership shares of companies. So let's say you buy a share of Apple stock. What that means is you are now part owner of Apple Computers, the company. And so when they have profits every quarter, you get a tiny fraction of their profits based on how many shares of stock you have in what's called dividends. And that's what, when they make profits, the earnings, they pay it out to their investors, and their investors are the owners, the stockholders, the shareholders, right? Another thing that people invest in are bonds, and bonds tend to have, so stocks, like I said, get about a 7 to 10, like stocks in aggregate, like altogether, in general, the whole market gets about a 7 to 10% return a year. Although last year was bad, it was about minus 20%. So far this year, we're already up 9% in the market. So it's not a steady 7 to 10%. It's like it goes up, it goes down. But if you look at it over a long period of time, it's about 7 to 10%, right? But you have to be patient. You have to be willing to hold for 20 years. You know, you have to not freak out when the market drops. So stocks have a relatively high return, but they also have a high risk of loss if you think in short timelines. And we'll talk about this more when we do into investing the next time. But bonds are a little safer, like they don't lose as much money, but they also don't give you as much money. Remember, high return is high risk. So the lower the risk, the lower the return. A savings account is very low risk. There's not much of a chance of you losing your money, but there's also not much of a chance of getting much money. So risk and return are correlated, right? And bonds are good for like older people in retirement. So I wouldn't recommend any of you get bonds until you're like 50. Next is real estate. A lot of people invest in real estate. Personally, I don't, because I like the passive nature of stocks. I don't like having to deal with tenants. I don't like having to deal with leaky faucets or broken roofs or like people trashing my place. There's all kinds of crap that can happen when you have real estate. Some people love it because they like the tangible nature of the thing. Like, oh, this is a house. You know, this is something I can, a real thing, you know, and I can see the money coming in, right? So that's why people like real estate. Some people are inclined to go into businesses, like create their own business, maybe an Amazon business, an Etsy business, or something like that. You know, some people are inclined to do that. And then there's venture capital, which is where you invest in someone else's business. And I'm not telling you guys that the way I do it is the way you should do it, because everybody is different, you know. Don't let people detract you from the way you're doing your investments, because you guys may just be playing a different game, you know. You use dice both in Monopoly and Risk, but if someone were to try to bring Risk rules to Monopoly, it wouldn't work. It's just a different game, right? So don't ignore ignore the haters who say the way you're investing is wrong, okay? But if you want to follow my lead, I would just recommend you guys go into stocks, into a stock index fund. That's how I would recommend you do it. But you know, don't let me stop you from opening a business, from going into real estate, from investing in someone else's business. So investing is like planting a tree. So the dollars you earn from your job, consider them seeds. You know, you can either eat the seeds now, you can spend the money now, or you can plant them, you can invest them. And with compound interest, and as they grow, they're going to produce so many more dollars for you, but you just have to be patient, right? Another thing about investing. So investing is a lot like exercising. You do it once, you put your money one time into one thing, it probably won't change anything. But you do it consistently. You save part of every paycheck for many, many years, and it will change your life. So it's very important to start as early as possible, because it gives your money the most time to compound. Take a look at a 20-year-old who invests, and we're going to say the market returns about 8%. I like to say 8% for the market. That's about an average return. If you're 20 years old and you want to have $1 million by age 60, you have to invest $286 a month. If you wait 10 years until you're 30, you have to invest $671. And you see how the money gets greater and greater the older you get, because compound interest requires time. So the more time you have, the more it can expand your return. So the older you start, the more money you're going to have to invest. And of course, if you get higher rates of return, which is definitely possible, like I think since I started investing, my return has been something like 14%. But that's because I took some risky bets. Like I invested some money in Tesla, and that blew up on me. In a good way. It like went whoo, you know. But most of my investments were stock index funds, like the S&P 500 or total market index fund. This is another visualization of what I was talking about. So the earlier you start, the more your money will be worth by age 60 or age 65. So if you start at age 20, and you invested at 8%, or was it 7%? I don't know what it is, but it's like 7 or 8% here. By the time you're 65, that money will be worth about $19. A single dollar will be worth $19. So you'll be able to 19x your money by 65 if you invested in the stock market and start at age 20. But then at age 21, it's going to be a little less. So the closer you get to 65, the less time you will have for that money to grow. So as you can kind of see, it goes down. And another thing, compounding is crazy. If you're saving $10,000 a year and you're getting 7%, the first 100,000 will take almost 8 years to make. Like for me, oh, sorry, my PC is getting low. I got to plug it in. Sorry. And then as you can see, like as time goes on, it gets shorter and shorter for each 100,000. 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2.5, 2.14, a little under 2, 1.66. Notice how it takes the same amount of time, actually takes less time to go from 600,000 to a million, 6.37 years, than it does to go from 0 to 100,000. That's because of compound interest. So it's so important to start early. and let compound interest, compounding, do the heavy lifting. And here's another example. I'm not going to talk about it. You can kind of see, you start earlier, same interest rate, you all retire at 65, but this person starts at age 25, investing $500 a month. They have this much. This person waits till 45 and invests even more, but they end up with less. That's how powerful compounding is. All right, so somebody said they were interested in learning about Roth IRAs. And Roth IRAs are a great investment account. So essentially, they're retirement accounts. So IRA stands for individual retirement account. And you can get stuff basically, your growth will be tax-free. So there's an investor called Peter Thiel, and I wouldn't expect any of you guys to know him, but he was one of the founders of PayPal. And in 1999, when PayPal was still not a publicly traded company, sorry, let me plug this in. So PayPal was still not a publicly traded company. He bought 1.7 million shares of PayPal. This was before it was publicly traded, so they're very cheap. But he spent $1,700, and he put that money, he put those PayPal shares into his Roth IRA. He never bought anything else. Like, he never added more money to it, nothing like that. But then 20 years later, or a little over 20 years later, the PayPal shares are now worth $5 billion. And because he did it through his Roth IRA instead of like a taxable brokerage account, it's all going to be tax-free. He's going to have to wait till age 59 and a half to pull it out, but $5 billion tax-free, just because he put it through his Roth IRA. So I would highly encourage everyone to open a Roth IRA and start putting money in there. Putting your investments in there. So anything you invest in a regular taxable brokerage account, you can invest in a Roth IRA. You just have to have earned income. Basically, you have to be filing taxes. And here's the difference between the Roth IRA and the regular brokerage. So a regular brokerage, you can get taxed every year on your dividends, and you can get taxed when you sell the shares, so the profits, the capital gains. And if you have it in a Roth IRA, it's all tax-free. But if you have it in a regular brokerage, it's taxed at, different rates based on whatever your tax bracket is. But anyway, the point is, invest in a Roth IRA before you invest in a taxable brokerage. And right now, the maximum limit for a Roth IRA is $6,500 a year. So if you can, I would recommend it. And here's how to open a Roth IRA. So basically, you choose a brokerage. Could be Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard. I have mine through Vanguard. My wife has hers through Fidelity. They're all good. It doesn't matter. You open the Roth IRA, you deposit the money, and then you buy the index funds. And so here's a cool thing. So remember how I said I expect at least one of you to be a millionaire by 30 in 10 years? It's possible to retire in 12 years if you wanted to. If you lived on 46% of your after-tax income and you invested the remaining 54%, in 12 years, you'd be able to have 25 times your annual cost of living. And we'll go into this next time when we talk about investing, but you'd be able to retire basically forever in 12 years, assuming you can save, 54% of your income. But let's say you can't save that much. Let's go a little bit down. Let's say half, right? If you save half your take-home pay, if you save and invest half your take-home pay, you can retire in 15 years. So yeah, your investments will provide enough income to support you forever. So I just want to reiterate, thank you guys for coming, being interested in this topic. I think it's a very important topic because so many of life's problems can be solved, not all of them, of course, but so many of life's problems can be solved with money. So I think it's a very important topic to have financial literacy. And, if you are determined to learn, no one can stop you. So questions?